You see, there is something rather curious happening right now. Something almost no one has quite put their finger on. It is not appearing in the newspapers, nor will you find it analyzed in the endless chatter of talk shows and think tanks. Yet it is there quietly, unmistakably, as real as the turning of the seasons. It is a great disappearance. Not a disappearance of bodies, but of attention, of participation, of identification, all around us. Without ceremony, without any announcement or declaration, a certain kind of person is fading from the public stage. They are not dying, not at all, but they are ceasing to play the game. They are stepping out of the noisy carnival of striving and comparison, out of the marketplace of opinions and outrage, and into something much more subtle, a kind of spacious silence. Now, this disappearance is not a protest, nor is it a rebellion. It is not motivated by anger or by some utopian desire to change the world. It is more like the tide retreating after the wave has crested, utterly natural, unforced, inevitable. For after a certain point in one's seeing, participation in the old play simply becomes impossible. You might say these people have awakened from a dream, and upon waking, they realize that most of what we call life, the constant pursuit of validation, the competition, the pretending, was never quite real to begin with. So, they stop fighting for a seat in the theater. They no longer wish to act their assigned parts. They simply put down the mask, bow out, and walk quietly into the daylight. It is not that they despise the world, far from it. They love it more deeply than ever, but in a different way. The love of the awakened is not possessive. It is not the love that tries to fix or to grasp or to claim. It is the love of one who sees the play for what it is, a divine comedy, a grand illusion, a marvelous bit of make-believe, and smiles. And perhaps, if you have felt it yourself, you will know what I mean. That strange pull to step back, to be still, to no longer explain yourself or defend your silence, that soft refusal to keep pretending that the race matters, that the noise is meaningful, that every thought must be shared, every opinion broadcast. Something in you has begun to crave stillness more than applause, depth more than company, truth more than belonging. It can be frightening at first, this quiet withdrawal, because for so long, your sense of being real was tied to being seen. You measured your existence by the reactions of others, the laughter, the praise, the argument, the validation. But once you begin to see that the whole show was sustained by mutual hypnosis, that we were all applauding our own illusions, a deep weariness sets in, a holy fatigue. You begin to suspect that maybe life was never meant to be a constant performance, that perhaps the truest gesture of love for the world is not to keep talking, but to fall silent and listen, to listen to the rustle beneath the noise, to the stillness beneath the movement, to the reality that was here long before you and will remain long after your name is forgotten. And so, the awakened withdraw. They don't storm out of the room. They simply stop showing up to the performance. They vanish into the margins, into the spaces between. You'll notice them. They are the ones who no longer have much to say about the latest outrage, who do not argue on behalf of their egos, who look upon the frenzy of the world with a mixture of compassion and quiet amusement. They are not lost, though, to the busy world. They seem invisible. They are rediscovering something ancient, the art of being nobody, the beauty of no longer needing to win, to convince, to be right, or to be seen. And perhaps if you listen very closely, you will sense that this disappearance is not an end at all, but a beginning. For when one fades from the noise, one does not vanish, one reappears in a deeper dimension, in that invisible field of awareness from which everything arises and to which everything returns. So do not mistake the silence of the awakened for absence. Their vanishing is not retreat, it is return, return to essence, return to the source. They have not gone anywhere, they have simply gone home. You see, human beings are wonderfully good at pretending. In fact, One might say that civilization itself is a very elaborate game of make-believe and a very convincing one. From the moment you are born, everyone around you takes it terribly seriously. They say, "Welcome to the world, my dear. Here is your name, your nationality, your gender, your religion, and your role. Be sure to play it well." And so you learn, as every good actor does, to play your part with conviction. You memorize your lines, polish your performance, and bow politely when the audience approves. You learn to smile when praised and to frown when scolded. You learn to chase what others chase, fear what others fear, and call it reality. But all the while, there's a quiet suspicion whispering beneath the noise that perhaps this is not reality at all, but theater. That all this seriousness is just part of the show. For you see, if everyone suddenly stopped pretending, the whole production would collapse in an instant. The markets, the politics, the hierarchies, the competitions, they all depend on agreement. On belief, we pretend that money is something more than paper. We pretend that our titles define who we are. We pretend that tomorrow is guaranteed, that the future must be conquered, that death is some terrible failure rather than a perfectly natural punctuation mark in the sentence of existence. And we pretend most of all that we are separate, that I am in here and you are out there, and that somehow this boundary is absolute. But when someone begins to see through the pretense, when they catch a glimpse behind the curtain and realize that the mighty wizard is just a little man pulling levers, they laugh. Not in cruelty, but in delight, because they realize that life was never the solemn struggle it was made out to be. It was, and has always been, a game of cosmic hide and seek. The universe, you see, loves to play. It hides itself in forms and forgets what it is, only to rediscover itself again and again, through you, through me, through all these marvelous masks we call people. The divine, pretending to be human. God playing the fool, just to experience what being lost feels like. And yet, we take it all so dreadfully seriously. We clutch our opinions like armor, defend our identities as though they were eternal, and build entire empires around the fragile idea of me. We call this adulthood, responsibility, success. But perhaps it is only a kind of mass hypnosis, a trance in which everyone agrees not to notice that they are asleep. So long as you remain inside the dream, it feels perfectly normal. You discuss the weather of the dream, the news of the dream, the ambitions of the dream. You compare your dream house to your neighbor's dream house, your dream children to their dream children. You argue passionately about whose dream is more valid, and then one day you begin to stir. Something subtle happens. Maybe you lose something you thought you couldn't live without. Maybe you sit in silence a little too long. Maybe, in a moment of deep stillness, the edges of the play blur and you see that the scenery was painted. The walls were cardboard. The seriousness, an illusion. And you laugh, perhaps, the first real laugh of your life, not because you have found an answer, but because you have finally understood the joke. To awaken, then, is not to acquire some new knowledge. It is to unlearn the seriousness of the game. It is to see that the actors have forgotten that they are acting, that the tragedy was only tragic because we believed it was. But remember, awakening does not make you superior to those still sleeping. It simply reveals that no one was ever superior to begin with. There are no enlightened and unenlightened people, only consciousness pretending to be at different stages of itself. So, when the awakened begin to withdraw from the dream, they do not do so out of contempt. They simply can no longer participate in something they know to be theater. They have seen that most of what we call progress is just the dream rearranging its furniture. They have realized that the real liberation is not out there, but here, in seeing the dream as dream. And when you see that, you don't destroy the play. You enjoy it. You play, but you don't cling. You act, but you don't identify. You participate lightly, as one who knows it's all a marvelous illusion. That, my friends, is the beginning of true sanity, the recognition that the world is not a prison but a playground, and that the purpose of life was never to escape the dream, but to wake up within it. You see, awakening is not what people imagine it to be. Most believe it will arrive like a sunrise, all golden light and celestial choirs, a grand revelation that makes everything suddenly simple and serene. But in truth, awakening often begins like an earthquake. It rattles the very foundation upon which your entire life was built. For when the curtain falls away, you do not first see angels, you see the machinery. You see the gears grinding behind the scenes. You notice how much of your life was lived on automatic, how much of your personality was merely a set of habits dressed up as choice. You see the fear hiding beneath the confidence, the longing disguised as ambition, the loneliness that busyness tried so hard to bury. And the first response is often not joy, it is disorientation. Because you realize that you have been dreaming for so long that you forgot who was dreaming. You feel, in a very real sense, as though you have lost the world, because the world you thought was solid begins to dissolve before your eyes. The people around you continue as before. They go to work, make small talk, chase their goals, discuss the weather, but you cannot quite join in anymore. It's as though you've stepped out of a movie theater into the bright light of day, and when you turn back, you can no longer take the flickering shadows seriously. You try, you really do, but the illusion has lost its power. The seriousness seems comical, the competition absurd, the urgency hollow, and yet you cannot mock it. For you see, you were once part of it too. You understand its beauty even in its blindness. So you smile not in superiority, but in compassion, because you know that to be asleep is not a sin, it is simply part of the play. But still, something in you trembles. You have no place to stand anymore. The old beliefs have crumbled, but the new ones have not yet arrived. The ground beneath your feet has melted into mystery. You find yourself between worlds, no longer identified with the dream, but not yet at ease in the awakening. This is the shock of seeing. It is the moment you discover that everything you took for granted, meaning, success, identity, was built upon the shifting sand of perception. The moment you realize that you, the one who thought, planned, worried, compared, achieved, were never quite real in the way you believed. For the self you defended so fiercely turns out to be an echo, a bundle of memories, opinions, and reactions stitched together by habit. And when you see that, truly see it, something within you gasps not in horror, but in awe. Because now you understand that behind all that noise, there was always silence. Behind all those thoughts, there was awareness. Behind the dream of me, there was the eternal watcher, pure consciousness, quietly observing it all. But you must be gentle with yourself here. Many people mistake this seeing for madness, because to the conditioned mind, it is madness. It feels like dying. In a way, it is. The old identity must dissolve. The mask must fall. And that process can feel like loss, grief, even despair. Yet, what is actually dying is not you, it is your idea of you. The little actor who believed they were the entire play. The shadow mistaking itself for the sun. When that illusion dies, what remains is not emptiness, but spaciousness, an infinite stillness that was always there, patiently waiting, behind the noise of becoming. And so, the shock gives way to silence. The confusion becomes curiosity. The fear softens into wonder. You begin to see that nothing real has been lost, only the unreal has fallen away. The world does not disappear, but it becomes transparent. You can still enjoy its colors, its textures, its laughter, and its tears, but you see through them. You understand that all the forms of life are like waves on the surface of the ocean, distinct yet inseparable from the water beneath. This is why, after awakening, people often appear quiet, almost withdrawn, not because they are numb, but because they are tasting reality without filters. They are watching the play unfold without the compulsion to edit the script. They have seen that everything, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, birth and death, is part of the same magnificent rhythm. It is a humbling vision. It strips you bare, but in that nakedness, you discover freedom. For when there is no one left to defend, no mask left to polish, you can finally breathe. You are no longer an actor terrified of forgetting your lines. You are the audience, and the stage, and the light itself. And so, the shock of seeing, though it shatters, also heals. It breaks the spell, not to leave you empty, but to make room for what is real. You see, awakening is not only a change in thinking, it is a change in feeling. It does not merely rearrange the furniture of your mind. It alters the architecture of your being. The nervous system itself begins to vibrate on another frequency, as though the instrument of consciousness has been retuned after lifetimes of being slightly off-key. Most of us, for most of our lives, are tuned for survival, for noise, for urgency, for the small pulse of anxiety that keeps the machine running. We have been conditioned to respond, to react, to compete, to grasp, to defend. It is what the body has learned to call living. But when awakening begins, that same nervous system discovers a new mode, not fight, not flight, but flow. And this, my friends, is where things become interesting, because once the system has tasted stillness, it can no longer bear false movement. Once it has known harmony, it begins to reject discord. Once consciousness has touched truth, illusion starts to feel poisonous. You may notice that you can no longer tolerate what once seemed normal: loud environments, shallow talk, angry crowds, manipulative ambition. They begin to feel abrasive, like sandpaper on the soul, not because you think you are better, but because your sensitivity has sharpened. Your inner tuning fork resonates differently now. You sense the false vibration before a word is even spoken. It is not judgment, it is simply recognition. Just as a body cannot digest plastic, your awakened nervous system cannot digest unreality. The more attuned you become to truth, the more any form of falseness, even your own, feels like static in the signal. So, you start to withdraw, not out of rejection, but out of necessity. You retreat from the world's noise, the way an organism retreats from toxins. This withdrawal is not antisocial, it is ecological. It is consciousness protecting its own clarity. Because awakening, you see, is delicate. It is like a flame that must be shielded from the wind. If you expose it too soon to the chaos of unconscious environments, it flickers and dims. You find yourself exhausted after ordinary interactions, drained by conversations that once seemed harmless, confused by the constant pull back into the old games. And the more you try to stay awake in a room full of sleepers, the more you realize how much energy it takes. You are maintaining presence while everyone else is trading projections. You are listening for silence while the room worships noise. You are seeing essence while the world debates appearances. This is why the awakened often find solitude not just peaceful, but necessary. It is not escape, it is recalibration. Alone, your nervous system finds its natural rhythm again. It stops bracing, stops performing, stops defending. It begins to breathe. Think of it like a plant. A plant cannot grow under fluorescent light forever. It may survive, yes, but it cannot flourish. It must return to the sun, to the soil, to the quiet rhythm of rain and wind. In the same way, your consciousness must have moments, days, months, perhaps even years of real stillness, where it can remember how to grow naturally again. This process can be disorienting. For a while, you may feel fragile, even overwhelmed. The nervous system, stripped of its old armor, feels everything, the beauty and the suffering, the laughter and the sorrow, all at once. It's as if your skin has been removed and every sensation touches the soul directly. But this sensitivity is not weakness. It is the beginning of true strength. Because only when you can feel fully, without distortion, can you live authentically. The false strength of the unawakened world, the bravado, the numbing, the endless distraction, is simply a defense against feeling. The true strength of awakening is the courage to stay open, to remain undefended, to feel the whole of life without retreating. And so the nervous system, this marvelous bridge between the body and the infinite, begins to transform. It becomes translucent, like a clear channel through which life flows unobstructed. You start to notice how energy moves through you, how thoughts ripple through the spine, how emotions change your breath, how silence itself seems to pulse inside your veins. You realize that your body is not a prison. It is an antenna, a living instrument of consciousness tuned to both heaven and earth. And as it clears, as it quiets, it begins to pick up frequencies you had long forgotten, the hum of existence itself. This is why, after awakening, many people say they can hear the world again, not with their ears, but with their whole being. The rustle of leaves, the breath of wind, the rhythm of footsteps, all become music once more. For the awakened nervous system is not a wall separating you from life. It is a window open on all sides. But such openness must be honored. You cannot return to the marketplace of noise and expect to stay clear forever. The world's madness will tempt you, the drama, the opinions, the urgency, all of it will try to reclaim your attention. And attention, you see, is the currency of consciousness. Where it goes, your energy follows. So, the wise do not waste it. They learn to live gently, to rest often, to nourish themselves with silence, to move among the noise as one moves through fog, slowly, lightly, without forgetting the direction home. Because ultimately, awakening is not about changing the world. It is about changing your way of being in it. The body, the mind, the nerves all become instruments for the same song, the music of awareness itself. And when that music is playing, even the simplest act, breathing, walking, drinking a cup of tea, becomes a prayer. You see, there comes a moment, quiet, inevitable, when the soul says, enough. Enough pretending, enough noise, enough performing the dance of seriousness that we once mistook for living. And that is when the withdrawal begins, not in bitterness, not in defeat, but in profound honesty. For the awakened one discovers that to stay immersed in the dream requires a constant act of self-betrayal, to pretend not to see what one has seen, to act as though the theater was still real after the lights have come up. It is exhausting. So, the awakened soul steps back, gently, without announcement. This is what I call the hermit phase. It is not a running away from the world. It is a returning to the center of it. It is a turning inward, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You begin to sense that the true revolution was never political or social, it was always internal. The whole universe was waiting for you to stop talking long enough to listen. At first, it may feel like losing everything. You no longer wish to attend the gatherings, the endless conversations about nothing in particular. You scroll through the social noise of the world and feel only weariness, not judgment, but a deep fatigue from pretending to care about illusions. You realize that most of what passes for connection is performance. People performing happiness, performing confidence, performing purpose. And you can no longer perform. So, you stop forcing yourself into places where your soul must shrink to fit. You stop translating your silence into small talk. You stop explaining your quietness to those who cannot yet hear their own. You stop apologizing for needing solitude, as though solitude were a flaw. And slowly, a new rhythm begins. You wake up one morning and realize you do not need to check the noise. You walk without destination. You notice the birdsong, the changing light, the gentle pulse of your own breath. There is nothing to prove now, nothing to chase. For the first time, perhaps, you are content to be. But make no mistake, this is not an easy phase. It is not blissful isolation in a meadow of enlightenment. No, this is the dark wood of the soul. This is the cocoon where the caterpillar dissolves before becoming the butterfly. The hermit phase is the dissolving of identity, of illusion, of every false certainty you once called my life. In that silence, all the ghosts you've been running from come to visit. The fears, the regrets, the unmet emotions. They appear like long-forgotten guests at the door of your awareness. And because there's nowhere left to run, you invite them in. You sit with them. You listen. You discover that none of them were enemies, only unacknowledged aspects of yourself, asking to be seen. It is during this time that the self begins to heal, not by effort, but by presence. Like mud settling in still water, clarity returns when you stop stirring the surface. The hermit does not fix themselves, they allow themselves. They give space for life to rearrange itself around truth. And soon, you notice something miraculous. Solitude no longer feels like loneliness. In fact, you realize that you were never truly with others, even when surrounded by crowds, because there was always a performance, a mask, a barrier. Now, alone, you are finally together with yourself. In this stillness, you begin to meet the one who was always here, the living awareness behind all your roles, all your dreams. It looks through your eyes now, fresh, innocent, and vast. You discover that you were never the actor. You were the stage itself, timeless, motionless, aware. This is why the hermit phase is sacred. It is not retreat, it is revelation. It is where consciousness learns to live without costume. It is where the divine begins to recognize itself, not in holy scriptures or philosophies, but in the simple, unmediated presence of being. Do not hurry through this phase. Do not measure it by the world's clock. The caterpillar does not rush its metamorphosis, and the seed does not demand to sprout tomorrow. Everything unfolds at the exact pace required by its nature. So, be patient with your own unfolding. If you feel weary of the world, honor that feeling. It is the wisdom of your being reminding you that constant engagement with unconsciousness dulls the flame of consciousness. If you need silence, take it. If you need solitude, embrace it. If you need to disappear, then disappear for a while. And know this, you are not abandoning the world. You are allowing the world to rediscover itself through your clarity. When you step away from the false, you make room for the real. When you stop performing, you give existence permission to speak, because in the silence of the hermit, life whispers its secrets. It teaches that nothing essential is ever lost. It was only hidden beneath the noise. It shows that solitude is not emptiness, but fullness beyond measure. It reveals that disappearing from the world is not disappearance at all. It is finally being seen, not as a role, but as reality itself. You see, when one withdraws into silence, into solitude, one does not escape the world, one invites it in. For all that we pushed aside in the noise of living now rises to the surface. Every unhealed wound, every hidden sorrow, every shadow you thought you had escaped quietly knocks at the door. And because there is nowhere left to run, you must open it. This is what I mean by the shadow. It is all that we refuse to see, not because it was evil, but because it was uncomfortable. All those fears we disguised as ambition, all those wounds we covered with smiles, all those desires we buried beneath duty, they come now, asking not for punishment, but for understanding. At first, you may resist. You may say, I came here for peace, not this. But you will find that true peace is not the absence of turmoil. It is the courage to meet it with open eyes. The awakened one learns that light and shadow are not enemies. They are companions. For without the shadow, how would you know what light is? And so, the work of integration begins. Not the work of control, but of compassion. You begin to see that your anger was never against others, but against your own unmet longing. You realize that the jealousy you condemned was simply your own creativity-seeking expression. You discover that the fear you tried so hard to hide was a distorted form of love, love for life, afraid to lose itself. You see, every shadow is simply a fragment of consciousness forgotten by the light of awareness. And when you bring your seeing to it, not as judge but as friend, it melts. Not because you have conquered it, but because you have remembered it. The shadow does not need to be destroyed, it needs to be embraced. Now, this process is not glamorous. There are no spiritual fireworks, no medals for facing the darkness. It is humble, patient work. Some days you may feel you have gone backwards, but remember, the deeper the roots grow into the earth, the stronger the tree becomes. You are growing inward, anchoring yourself in reality. You begin to notice small miracles. Where once there was self-hatred, there is now tenderness. Where once you judged others, you now see their pain mirrored in your own. Where once you felt isolated, you begin to sense an invisible thread connecting every heart to yours. Integration is not about becoming pure, it is about becoming whole. The light within you is not complete until it shines through every corner of your being. To deny your darkness is to deny half of existence. To embrace it is to rediscover the fullness of life itself. And so, solitude transforms into alchemy. The hermit becomes the healer not by fixing, but by witnessing. The silence becomes luminous. The wounds become wisdom. The sorrow becomes depth. When you have faced your shadow fully, something extraordinary happens. The world no longer frightens you. Because you have seen your own darkness and made peace with it, you can no longer project it onto others. The division between me and them, good and bad, begins to dissolve. You see that every act of cruelty, every outburst of ignorance, every bit of unconscious behavior was simply another shadow seeking light. And in that seeing, compassion dawns, not sentimental compassion, not pity, but the quiet recognition that all beings are doing their best within the limits of their awareness. You understand that even those who seem most lost are part of the same great unfolding that brought you here. This is integration, not the victory of light over dark, but the marriage of the two. The alchemy by which the soul becomes whole again. And from this wholeness arises a new kind of strength, a strength without hardness, a clarity without judgment, a wisdom without arrogance. You no longer need to perform goodness. You are goodness because you have included everything in yourself. The one who has integrated the shadow does not escape humanity. They become fully human for the first time. They can walk into the world's confusion and remain undisturbed. They can love without needing to fix. They can see without needing to label. They can act without being possessed by reaction. For now they know that all opposites are two ends of the same rope, and the rope itself is life. You see, once the shadow has been embraced, once light and dark are no longer at war within you, something beautiful and strange begins to happen. You no longer live entirely in the world, and yet you do not live outside it either. You dwell, as it were, on the border between the sleeping and the awake, between form and formlessness, between the play and the audience. I call this the life of the border dweller, not because it is a place of exile, but because it is a place of freedom. The border is where opposites meet and dance, where the ocean kisses the shore, where sky and earth trade colors at dusk. It is the realm of the awakened, not withdrawn from the dream, but no longer caught in it. To live on the border is to move lightly through the world of forms, knowing their impermanence. You can walk through the marketplace and hear the music of eternity behind the clamor. You can sit in conversation and sense the silence between words. You can face conflict and feel no need to win, because you understand that both sides are two hands of the same body, clapping. The border dweller does not reject the dream. They simply know it as a dream. And so they participate with a peculiar joy, the joy of an actor who has remembered that the play is make-believe, but continues to act beautifully anyway, because now the acting itself becomes art. This is what it means to live consciously within unconscious systems. You still pay your bills, feed your children, speak with your neighbors, but beneath it all, there is a soft laughter, a knowing that all this seriousness is a marvelous bit of theater. You no longer cling to the outcome. You move through life as water moves through a stream, taking the shape of every moment, yet remaining free. But there is also a subtle challenge to this way of being, for the border dweller cannot belong completely to either side. To the sleeping, you seem strange, too quiet, too detached, perhaps even indifferent. To the spiritually ambitious, you seem lazy, too ordinary, not working hard enough on your enlightenment. You will not fit neatly into anyone's idea of what awakening should look like. And that is precisely the point, for to live on the border is to let go of definition altogether. You no longer need to be this or that saint or sinner, worldly or spiritual, teacher or student. You are simply alive, breathing, aware, a mirror for whatever stands before you. From this place, your actions begin to flow effortlessly. You find yourself helping when help is needed, withdrawing when silence is required, laughing when life becomes absurd, and weeping when the heart demands it. There is no script now, no agenda. Life moves through you the way wind moves through the reeds, freely, musically, without possession. You discover that the world doesn't need saving. For the more clearly you see, the more naturally right action emerges. You stop trying to fix people and begin to understand them. You stop arguing with existence and start dancing with it. You realize that enlightenment was never about escape. It was about intimacy, the ability to be fully present in both the beauty and the chaos of life, without resistance. To live at the border is to understand that everything is sacred because nothing is separate. The mundane and the divine are not two. Washing dishes is the same miracle as meditating under a tree. Talking with a stranger is as holy as prayer. Life itself, this ordinary, shimmering moment, is the temple. And so, the border dweller becomes a bridge. They carry the fragrance of the unseen into the seen and the wisdom of silence into the noise. They are the quiet presence in the meeting, the calm eye in the storm, the one who listens when everyone else is shouting. They are not trying to change the world, but the world changes around them simply by their being. This is the paradox of the awakened life. When you stop trying to make an impact, you become impactful. When you stop striving to be someone, you become everything. When you stop insisting on meaning, existence reveals its meaning through you. To live on the border, then, is to surrender to mystery. You no longer demand answers, because you have seen that the question and the answer are two sides of the same coin, flipping endlessly in the air of consciousness. You do not cling to certainty, because certainty is far too small for the vastness you have become. Instead, you rest in the unresolvable, the unknowable, the eternal now. And in that resting, you are free. You see, even though the awakened often begin their journey in solitude, life has a curious way of bringing them together, not through effort, not through advertising or organization, but through resonance, like tuning forks vibrating in the same key across vast distances. For consciousness, once awakened, begins to recognize itself wherever it appears. And when one flame meets another, they do not compete, They simply burn brighter. So, across the world, something unseen is forming. No movement, no ideology, no leader, only a quiet constellation of souls who have turned inward, discovered their own depth, and now live from it. They do not gather in crowds, they gather in stillness. They meet not by appointment, but by recognition, a glance, a word, a shared silence that says, "Ah, you too have seen it." These gatherings are small, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes only 1. They happen in coffee shops, on park benches, in unexpected corners of the internet, or in the simple meeting of eyes between strangers who suddenly feel they've met before. There is no doctrine, no membership, no requirement to agree, because awakening does not need agreement. It only needs authenticity. This is the gathering of the quiet ones, people who have grown tired of shouting about truth and have instead become silent enough to embody it. They no longer need to convert or convince. Their presence itself is teaching enough. For you see, truth does not travel through argument. It travels through being. And the beauty of this quiet gathering is that it builds not through effort, but through gravity. Each awakened heart becomes a center of calm around which others begin to orbit. Those still lost in the noise feel, perhaps for the first time, a strange relief in the presence of someone who does not need to win, does not need to perform, does not need to be right. It is not what the quiet ones say that matters, but what they don't say. Their silence speaks of trust, of spaciousness, of the freedom that comes when you stop clinging to appearances. And in that silence, others begin to breathe again. In time, these pockets of stillness become like oases in the desert of distraction. Small communities begin to form, not around dogma, but around shared awareness. Artists who paint from presence, teachers who teach without preaching, friends who meet not to escape the world, but to experience it more deeply. They are building the new world, not by opposing the old, but by quietly living a different way. For the true transformation of humanity does not happen through revolution, it happens through realization. Every person who awakens adds a note of clarity to the collective symphony. And the music of that awareness begins to ripple outward in ways no one can measure. But make no mistake, this gathering is invisible to the unseeing eye. It does not seek recognition. It does not advertise its presence. It does not seek approval. It grows underground, like roots in the dark, preparing the soil for a future spring. And perhaps that is how it must be. For consciousness does not announce itself with fireworks. It moves like dawn, slowly, gently, transforming everything by simply rising. So, if you find yourself meeting such people, those who do not talk too much, who listen more than they speak, who laugh softly at the seriousness of the world, cherish them. They are not merely friends. They are mirrors of your own awakening. You have found your tribe, though it may have no name. And if you have not yet met them, do not despair. The quiet ones are everywhere, scattered like seeds across the earth, waiting for the right moment, the right frequency, the right silence to blossom together. For consciousness has no borders. It moves through time and space the way fragrance moves through air, unseen, yet unmistakable. And every soul who awakens becomes a part of that fragrance, adding to the perfume of the real. This, then, is how the world begins to change, not through noise, but through stillness, not through conquest, but through communion. It is the meeting of those who have discovered that the deepest way to serve humanity is to become fully human, fully awake, fully alive. And from their quiet presence, a new world will grow, not imposed from above, but blooming from within. You see, every withdrawal, every silence, every disappearance has its rhythm. It is not meant to last forever, for nothing in the universe is permanent, not even solitude. After the stillness, there comes a stirring, a quiet impulse to move again, to share, to create, to return. But now, the one who returns is not the one who left. The mask is gone, the armor has fallen away, and what walks back into the world is something entirely new, or perhaps something timeless that has simply remembered itself. The awakened person returns to society not to change it, but to be in it, fully, freely, lightly. They are no longer fighting the current of life because they have seen that they are the current. They no longer struggle to make the world spiritual, for they have realized that it already is. The divine was never elsewhere. It was always hidden in plain sight, in the laughter of a child, in the sound of rain on rooftops, in the hum of a city at night. When you return after awakening, you carry this recognition quietly within you, like a lamp concealed in your chest. Wherever you go, it casts a soft light, not blinding, not demanding, simply present, and those who are ready to see will feel it. They may not understand what has changed about you, only that they feel more at peace in your presence, as though the noise in their own minds briefly subsided. You will not speak much about awakening. You will not try to convince anyone that you've found something extraordinary, because you see now that everyone already has it. They have simply forgotten, and the best way to remind them is not through argument, but through example, through the ease of your laughter, the patience of your silence, the authenticity of your being. The return, then, is not a mission, it is a manifestation. You become a mirror for others, a living invitation for the divine to recognize itself in human form. You walk through the market, the classroom, the kitchen, the crowded street, and everywhere you go, you quietly affirm that this too is sacred. The ordinary becomes luminous. The cup of tea, the passing conversation, the act of tying your shoes all shimmer with the same light that saints once sought in mountains and monasteries, because now you understand that heaven was never a destination, it was a perception. To live like this is to move through life with the grace of one who dances to music that others cannot yet hear. You are still among them, yes, but you do not take the drama personally. You no longer feel the need to correct or to control. You allow life to unfold, and in that allowing, you find peace. Now, some might call this detachment, but it is not coldness, it is intimacy without possession. For when you no longer cling to life, you are finally able to love it. When you stop demanding permanence from impermanent things, you discover beauty everywhere. And so the awakened one gives freely not because they have been told to, but because generosity has become as natural as breathing. You see, the true gift of awakening is not enlightenment, it is embodiment. The ability to walk through this chaotic, wondrous, heartbreaking world as consciousness made flesh, knowing that every tear, every laugh, every failure, and every success is but another wave in the great ocean of being. The return is the completion of the circle from the noise into the silence, from the silence back into the world, carrying that silence within. The hermit becomes the healer, the seeker becomes the guide, and the dreamer becomes the dream itself. But even this transformation is not final, for life keeps unfolding, keeps playing, keeps dancing, its endless dance of remembering and forgetting. And so, the awakened live among us, invisible and ordinary. You might pass one in the street and never know. They may be a teacher, a gardener, a bus driver, a mother rocking her child to sleep. They wear no halos. They claim no titles. And yet something about them feels profoundly real, as though they are not in the world, but the world is in them. Their presence is their teaching. They do not try to fix the dream. They simply dream consciously, and in their quiet way, they become the medicine the world didn't know it was seeking. For every soul that returns from the silence brings with it a little more light, a little more clarity, a little more love. And slowly, imperceptibly, The world begins to remember itself, not through revolutions, not through slogans, but through the simple grace of presence. That is the reappearance of the real, when what is eternal begins to live comfortably inside what is temporary. When infinity takes a human form and smiles, you see, humanity moves in cycles, just as the moon waxes and wanes as the tides rise and fall. There are moments when consciousness seems to sleep deeply, lost in dreams of separation and conquest. And then there are moments when it begins to stir faintly at first, like a whisper beneath the noise. We are living, right now, in such a moment of stirring. Something vast and invisible is turning. The collective dream is beginning to crack at the edges. And through those cracks, light seeps in. It is not the end of the world, but the end of the world as we imagined it to be. Solid, controllable, permanent. And this can be frightening, because the mind clings to its certainties even when they hurt. Look around. Everything that once seemed unshakable is shifting. Institutions wobble. Ideas decay. Identities dissolve. The very pace of existence seems to accelerate toward a kind of fever, as though the old dream is burning itself out. But what looks like chaos from one level of perception is clarity from another. The structures are not collapsing as punishment. They are collapsing to make space for something truer. You see, the same awakening that happens in the individual is now beginning to happen in the collective. The same nervous system that trembles in one human being is trembling in humanity itself. The same withdrawal that one soul feels from the noise of falsehood is being mirrored on a planetary scale, millions quietly turning away from the endless cycle of distraction, competition, and pretense. They may not call it awakening. Some will call it burnout, others depression, others disillusionment. But underneath these labels lies the same impulse consciousness refusing to participate in unreality any longer. The human spirit, tired of playing roles, is longing to remember itself. 2025. Then is not an omen of destruction, but of reorganization. The energies of the world are rearranging themselves to support a new mode of being. It is not about returning to the past or rushing toward a utopia. It is about learning to dwell in the present with awareness. It is the great pivot from doing to being, from striving to seeing, from noise to harmony. And of course, such transitions feel uneasy. When the collective mind awakens, all the shadows of humanity rise to the surface. Fear, division, greed, rage, they are not new. They are simply visible now. It is like stirring a pond that has long been still. The silt rises before the water clears. So do not despair at the confusion of the times. It is the necessary turbulence of transformation. You may notice, too, that time itself feels different. The old schedules, the relentless calendars, the obsession with progress, all seem to lose their authority. People begin to feel that life must slow down, that silence is not laziness but medicine, that presence is not luxury but necessity. The collective nervous system, stretched to breaking, is beginning to remember how to breathe again. Now, I do not mean that everyone will awaken at once. Far from it. Most will continue their roles in the dream, and that is perfectly fine. But among them will walk the quiet ones, the border dwellers, the integrated souls, the ones who have touched the still point at the center of the storm. They are the seeds of a new kind of civilization, one not built on fear, but on awareness. The world, as it was organized around control, the belief that safety could be achieved by managing everything and everyone. The new world, which is already budding beneath the old, is organized around trust, the understanding that life does not need to be forced, only allowed. And so you may begin to see new forms of living arise, communities that value consciousness over consumption, relationships founded on presence rather than projection, work that expresses love instead of anxiety. These are not fantasies. They are the natural fruits of awakening. The collective shift, then, is not something you must push. You do not need to save the world, because the world is saving itself through you, through every moment of genuine awareness, through every act of seeing without judgment. The new consciousness does not come with banners or slogans. It comes quietly, through ordinary people living with extraordinary simplicity. When enough individuals find that still point within themselves, the vibration of the whole changes. Just as a single clear tone can tune an entire orchestra, a few who live consciously can awaken resonance in the many. So, 2025 is not a prophecy, it is a mirror. It reflects where humanity stands, between forgetting and remembering, between fear and trust, between noise and silence. It is the year the world begins to understand that evolution is not about going somewhere else, it is about seeing where we already are. And those who have disappeared from the noise, who have chosen solitude and silence, are not abandoning the world. They are anchoring the frequency of this shift. Their stillness is not passivity, it is participation at the deepest level. They are the roots holding the earth steady while the storm passes. So do not be afraid of what is dissolving. Let it dissolve. The illusion of separation, the addiction to seriousness, the machinery of endless urgency, they have served their purpose. They have brought us to the edge where the human and the divine meet. And at that edge, at that luminous border, something new is already shining through. And so, my friends, if you have listened this far, you will have noticed that the journey we've spoken of, from the noise into the silence, from the play into the witnessing, from the world into the heart, is not a journey in miles. It is a journey in awareness. You have not gone anywhere. You have simply remembered what was always here. The quiet disappearance was never an ending. It was a homecoming. For what vanishes in awakening is only the false. What remains is the real, and the real was never absent. It was only covered by layers of noise, by the chatter of the frightened mind, by the endless performance of being someone. Now, that performance is over. The curtain has fallen, and yet the stage remains. The lights are still warm. The audience, too, was you all along. The whole spectacle, the laughter, the sorrow, the triumphs, the losses, was your own consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. So what now, you might ask? Do we stay hidden in the mountains, lost in solitude, safe from the dream? No, for awakening is not retreat. It is return. The hermit comes back to the village, but now with eyes that see eternity in the marketplace. The awakened one walks among the people, yet remains as silent within as the stars above them. Live like that fully in the world, yet free of it. Speak when speech flows, fall silent when it does not. Laugh often. Be kind, especially to those still lost in the seriousness of the play. Do not try to wake them. The dream must finish its scene. Simply love them, for they too are you, pretending not to know. And if ever you find yourself weary again, step back into the silence. The door to stillness is never locked. The breath is always there, waiting, faithful as the tide. Inhale the universe, exhale the illusion. Rest. Do not fear disappearance, for what you truly are cannot vanish. Do not fear solitude, for you have never been alone. Do not fear change, for what changes is not you, but what you no longer need to carry. You are the witness behind it all, the vast, open sky in which clouds come and go, the ocean that welcomes every wave and never holds a grudge. You are the stillness that watches the dance, the silence that gives birth to every sound. And perhaps in that knowing, you will understand why the awakened smile so easily, because they see that the game was never a mistake. The confusion, the seeking, the heartbreak, all were necessary gestures in the great play of remembering. Without them, awakening would have no meaning. So walk gently now, not as a seeker, but as a finder, not as one who knows, but as one who sees. Let your life be your teaching. Let your presence be your offering. Let your silence be your song. And when the world seems to lose itself again, as it surely will, do not despair. The rhythm of forgetting and remembering is eternal. You cannot force the tide, but you can trust it. For everything returns, every dawn, every spring, every soul. Disappear if you must. Return when you are ready. But wherever you are in the market or the mountain, in solitude or in love, remember, there is no place you can go where the whole is not already with you. You were never outside of it. You were never separate from it. You were never less than it. You are it, the eternal pulse, the living mystery, the laughter of the universe at play. So go on, be still, and know the dream was never other than the dreamer. And when you wake, smile,